Welcome back to the Garage Lectures. They're like TED Talks, only less professional. Now, the first Garage Lecture was given by my colleague Hans Larson of the Redpath Museum, McGill University, and it took place in the garage, and he talked about mammal skulls and mammal teeth. I highly recommend you check it out. Really cool lecture. The next Garage Lecture will be given by me, and we're starting in the garage, but really the lecture itself is in the broader spirit of garage lectures, which just means basically scientists or biologists talking about their work in an impromptu real setting. And so we're going to go to British Columbia, my cabin in northern British Columbia, and I'm going to describe to you the life of an animal trail. We're going to talk about wolves, we're going to talk about grizzly bears, we're going to talk about wolverines a little bit, and of course there'll be a bunch about moose. And I'm going to tell this story while walking around on a remote animal trail by our cabin, and interspersing that in a set of incredible camera trap footage, remote cameras that record animal behavior throughout the entire year. So I hope you enjoy it. And don't forget to check out the other garage lectures.
Camera traps. They're called game cameras sometimes. And what they do is they detect the infrared signals of heat coming off of animals. And so you can put them in remote locations like we are right here, and you can use them as a way of attempting to assess animal behavior, how many animals are present. And so they have a cool sensor array here, which combines both a motion sensor and a heat detector. So if it triggers a motion sensor with heat moving across the sensor, then it's going to turn on and record for 30 seconds to a minute whatever's happening in the world around it. Right now what I'm doing is I'm arming the camera. So it's got lithium-ion batteries, I've got a memory card in it, and I'm just going to basically turn it on, and that's going to live here for the entire year, taking videos every time an animal walks by, which is usually about 140 to 180 times it'll take a picture this coming year. So this is a ow. This is a bear tree, and what the bears will often do is they'll rub up and down on them for reasons that aren't immediately clear, but it could include getting rid of excess fur when they're shedding. It could be that it just feels good, like scratching an itch, again, possibly during the shedding period. Or it could be that they're giving signals to other bears and to other animals, perhaps, that there's a bear around and Bob is here, and so stay away, or Bob went here, you know, I'm looking for a mate, come find me. It's another really cool example of a bear tree. What usually happens is a bear, and it seems to me that it's often black bear based on the videos we've seen. They take a few bites out of the tree and scratch it a little bit, removing the bark, which then causes the tree to secrete sap all over the bark. And then they come and rub on it. So you see on here, there's a whole bunch of bear hair that's stuck on the tree, probably a combination of black and grizzly bear, both of which will rub on this particular tree. So one of the other interesting things here is that because all the animals end up using these trees to signal to each other, you end up seeing another really cool phenomenon about north temperate forests. And that is they tend to be nitrogen limited when it comes to primary productivity. So the reason why there isn't a lot more greenery around is because there's not enough nitrogen. Animals excrete nitrogen as the byproduct of protein metabolism, as well as the metabolism of other nitrogenous compounds such as DNA. Now, urea, with all of its nitrogen in it, will basically provide a local fertilization of the environment and thereby giving a little flush of growth. And you can see it on the tree here. So the bears are rubbing on here. The bears are often peeing when they're rubbing. Wolves will also pee here. And so you've had a little nitrogen enrichment on this lower part of the tree. But you see basically a little flush of green algae that is growing here because there's a particular local input of nitrogen here that favors the increase in the growth of plants. My brother noticed that years ago, not my observation. But in reality, the place we first noticed this was right outside our cabin. So I'm standing below our porch of our cabin here, and what you see is an incredible flush of the growth of grass here. Right along the edge of the cabin, whereas just to the side of the porch, there isn't any flush of growth like this. And of course, it's because of the local enrichment provided by us peeing off the porch when it's pouring rain and we don't actually want to get up and put on our boots and go out to the outhouse. This was one of the first places that inspired our camera trap work. And if you take a look, there's 3 trails. So it's a 3-way split to the different trails. One might logically think that that trail is going to go to, I don't know, feeding patch 1, and that trail over there is going to go to feeding patch 2, and that one there. But that's not the case. In just another couple hundred meters, they all connect up again without being appreciably different in where they've gone. So we started wondering, why are there splits in these trails? Just a basic natural history question. Why would some animals go on one side and other animals on the other when there's no obvious benefit to why they might do so? So we set up camera traps to ask, for instance, maybe the moose go one way and the bears go the other way. Or maybe moose with antlers go one way and moose without antlers go the other way. Or maybe when you're going this direction, it seems easier to go on that path. But when you're coming from the other end of the split, it seems easier to go on this path. Or it's theoretically possible, I think, that some animals are right-handed, some individuals are right-handed, and some are left-handed. Some go to the left, some go to the right every time. So we're going to use the camera traps as a way of trying to understand how that actually works. Presumably, the ability to move around safely across the terrain is one of the primary things that's determining which way animals will go. And so here we have another split where there's a path coming up underneath the tree there, but there's also a side path sort of moving across that other end of the tree there. And we noticed on our camera traps last winter that right in here you basically had a whole bunch of moose having trouble slipping and tripping, presumably on the ice. The reason it might be slippery is because there's a stream just over here, and so maybe at certain times you'll have a little bit of ice that accumulates right here. But here is a particularly obvious situation where a moose with antlers will have a big difficulty getting through on the trail. So I've got a great video of a moose turning his antlers sideways and putting it through, almost like it's thinking the process through in advance. It's pretty cool. The reason why we have a camera trap set up here is because my wife, Heather, had this cool idea to see how moose navigate this big obstacle in front of us. Moose are huge animals, and it might be hard for them to go over or under this particular obstacle. So I've been recording over the years where they go through the center right here, and it's really funny to see moose try to squeeze through there. Of course, they're always small moose. Over here, we have a place where the moose jump over it. And as you can see, it's basically chest height on me here. And yet moose will jump right over this, barely scraping their undersides. There's also a place up here where moose sometimes go, but in this particular case, it's a little steep and slippery. And sometimes we see the moose slip and slide over there. And a broken leg on a moose is not going to be a good thing. So can a moose survive a broken leg? Well, we have the opportunity to check in our camera traps, and sure enough, we see moose after moose getting around on what appears to be a broken and then healed leg. This particular moose we have now seen over the span of 3 different years. But there's all sorts of other moose with different leg injuries. And in the past year, I've also seen one that had a baby with it that had successfully raised over the winter. And you can see this moose running along with a bad leg. So it's really quite horrendous to watch sometimes, but it's also remarkable to us that all these injuries are survivable, at least to some extent. Mammals are famous for relying on smell. Now, so what they do is that they can't always go and smell each other just walking around, although they do that too, but rather they leave signals for each other on particular signposts. And so this turns out to be a olfactory signpost for many animals. Why they picked this, I have no idea. But we just see it on our camera trap, which is mounted right over there year after year, that almost every animal stops and smells this bush. It's like a place where people leave little post-it notes or like a mailbox for everybody who can read the information. So we see bears smelling this. Every moose pretty much smells this. We see wolves peeing and smelling and rolling in this area. But we also see other animals, including lynx, and black bears, so black bears and grizzly bears, and all kinds of animals will use this as a signpost. So multiple species, multiple individuals over many years are using just this little sprig of conifer right here, a little hemlock. You might wonder why there's so many animals on this specific trail in the first place. Why do we get so many with our camera traps? The main reason is that this isn't really an area that they hang out. Rather, they use it to get from point A to point B. And those 2 points are places that are good for foraging and safety in the summer versus the winter. So in the fall, you see all of the animals, mostly moose, trucking their way down this trail to lower parts of the river. And then in the spring, you see them all coming back. Bears also, you see moving one way in the spring and one way in the fall generally. The only animals that seem really to hang out here at any length of time, beyond small ones, is the wolves. And the wolves, of course, are trying to hunt the animals. So you can see them following the moose on any given day, and presumably trying to find calves or other weak ones that they can prey on. There's also a period of time in the spring and summer where the alpha dominant male and female of the wolf pack will take off on their own, find a den, give birth, and then raise the cubs for a while until the cubs are ready to leave the den. And then they'll hook back up with the rest of the pack. So in this part of the forest, we every year see multiple times on multiple camera traps a pregnant female wolf and the male that's with her. We also see lots of other small critters like red squirrels and grouse and long-tailed weasels and fishers and martens, wolverines. The last 3 of those all are weasels. And then we also see ermines, which are also weasels. One of my favorites is a lynx who came walking right along this cool log and then leaped off onto the other side. A couple of our camera traps are in kind of special locations. This one is on a trail, but it's a very different kind of trail. It's a trail that the bears use in the fall to patrol a salmon spawning stream for carcasses that they then obviously feed on to prepare for their long winter hibernation. So right now I'm walking up that stream to the particular location where we put the camera, and we'll see how it's doing. And here it is. It's a little bit grown over now. I'm going to clear it out in a second. And this is why it was so overgrown there, is this mother grizzly bear has decided to eat red osier dogwood berries. And the cubs are helping out, and this would be so funny if the mother was to get off the branch right there and watch the cub go flying. The other thing I want to show you here is a little bit later just how noisy these cubs are. It's really crazy. Check it out. This is a tiny creek. Tiny, tiny, tiny creek. And yet, the water is so high that I can barely wade up it to get our camera trap position. We have to set our camera trap by raft. Now, that's a first. I almost went swimming there a couple times. We set up this camera because we thought it'd be a really cool place to watch bears that are actually foraging for salmon. And one of the coolest things we first saw was this mother and cubs. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now 4 is an exceptional number of cubs for a grizzly bear. Very rarely recorded. Not unprecedented, of course. But it was really fun to track the development of these cubs. You see the last one is a bit smaller than the others. And it's funny because in video after video, there's 3 cubs that are kind of out in front. And then there's a 4th cub that kind of comes along noticeably behind the first 3. Wait for it. Wait for it. There he is. Now, you can see here that basically the bears are foraging for salmon in very cold conditions. This is November 4th. The temperature is -4 degrees Celsius. And so we also have really cool images of larger bears that are foraging for salmon during this time period. And they get this wonderful coating of ice for when water splashes on their coat and then freezes. So it's like if you get frosty on your beard or in your scarf in the winter, the bears get the same thing when they're foraging for salmon.
We'll have more garage lectures for you moving forward. The next one is going to be about reptiles, and we'll take you into a snake breeding room, and you'll learn all about the evolution, behavior, genetics, morphology, and anatomy of snakes.
There are so many animals on this trail, you might wonder, what do we do for safety, given the number of them are moose, which kill more people than bears every year, and bears, grizzly and black. And wolves. Of course, we have nothing to fear from wolves. They just simply don't bother humans. But with moose during the rutting season, when they're mating, they can be really amped up on testosterone and basically kill people. But also bears, of course, if they're startled or they're protecting their cubs, they can be quite dangerous as well. Well, the first thing is that there are actually not that many animals on this trail. It's really only going one way in the fall and the other way in the spring. So we almost never encounter anything on this trail, which is a combination of that and the fact that there are few of them, and also the fact that we tend to make a lot of noise if there's more than 2 people on the trail or they can smell us coming. But we also make noise if we're in areas where we can't see very far, and if all that fails and we do encounter an animal, usually it just runs away, but if it doesn't, we have bear spray that we can use, which is essentially a big pack of pepper spray that's designed for bears that we can use to spray the bear if absolutely necessary. I've never done it myself, but pepper spray is extremely effective at protecting people from bears. Well, I just said we've had very few overall, but one of them occurred right here. My then 14-year-old daughter and I were just finishing setting up that camera trap, which is pointing on this three-way split in the trail, when we heard something behind us. And it was like a whoosh, like that, and just right over here there was a big grizzly bear that had just seen us and looked up at us and was just startled, and we stood there and looked at it, and it looked at us, and it didn't run right away as grizzly bears often do, but instead just kind of looked at us and was looking back and forth. And so just to make sure it knew we were people and not something else, I started saying, "Hey bear, hey bear," and he slowly started wandering off the trail and around. And at that point I realized that we'd better go down the trail to my wife and other daughter, who were down there somewhere measuring aspects of the trail for our study. And so we took off, and my daughter had her GoPro running the whole time, but we were so shocked by seeing the bear and not thinking clearly that she kept the GoPro pointing over there while the bear was actually up over there. So we could have had a video of the bear looking at us the whole time, but it just wasn't one of those things that registered in the moment of excitement.